Good morning. It's 10:15 on the Monday before the day that the Strategic Planning Committee in Wiltshire Unitary Council will be meeting to decide the fate of the proposed incinerator in Westbury. Now, my name's Daniel Gmaj. I'm just one of 1,638 members of the Westbury Gasification Action Group, now known as No Westbury Incinerator. Gasification is mentioned because if you see the plant behind me, which hails back to 2018, was rejected on scale alone, so there is precedence for rejection. But this was a gasification group. Now, this technology at the time was referred to by the applicants as the only way to go, as it was so much safer and cleaner than a moving grate incinerator. Now, interesting that they've now moved to do something completely different. But I'm not going to argue today for any of the arguments, because they're all utterly compelling to refuse this plant. There are thousands and thousands of documents now in the public domain, from doctors, from engineers, from members of the public, members of the community, the wider community, and many, many learned people who have spent many hours studying this. And it's very interesting that over 2,000 objections made and registered on the council website have been honed down to just 3/4 of a page in Andrew Guest's report, in which he moves to approve this plant. The reason I'm making this video today is not to go through all the arguments. You have all of those available to you. I'm speaking directly to members of the Strategic Planning Committee at Wiltshire Unitary Council now. You have everything available to you. Now, whether you have been given access to these, whether you've seen all of the documents, we have no way of knowing. We are absolutely safe and resolute in our considered opinion that there is absolutely no way, based on the evidence, that this can go ahead. On the precedents of previous refusals, and also, if you advise from the health and safety, the precautionary principle advised by our MP and many, many others with regards to this form of technology in the locale so close to, as you see behind us, the town of Westbury. This is Westbury. This over here is the existing sorting plant, which is Hills, the parent company of Northacre Renewables, a very spurious use of the word renewable there. And they're the parent company. So I don't believe Northacre Renewables would actually exist if it wasn't for Hills. Behind here, you'll just see a white building. This is Arla Foods. And this incinerator, which is smaller, this was the gasification plant, say, from 2018. This is from the client's own application. This is a representation of what it would look like. So they actually said at the time this is what it would look like. The moving grate incinerator now proposed is much, much larger in scale. And the composites of all the buildings around, the lorry impact, everything. I'm not going to go into any of these arguments. They're all very clear. They all exist. They're a matter of public record. Please go and check them out. And if you haven't been given access to them, or indeed nice clear pictures like this, you need to be questioning those that have given you the move to approve. So the reason I'm here today is to talk about numbers. If 2,000 plus very complex applications have been honed down to just 3/4 of a page is my understanding on Mr. Guest's move to approve. This is simply unacceptable. This is one of many simply unacceptable things, and I'm going to redress that balance today. So firstly, I'm aware that no visuals will be allowed to be used during the presentation on the 22nd at 10:30 in exactly 24 hours time as I record this. And that's a shame, because you will be offered many visuals to look at by the proposing officer, and they will not have clarity as they should have. When we are talking about clarity, let's remember one thing first of all, that it's Wiltshire Council's own waste strategy that incineration should be right at the bottom peak here, disposal and other recovery. So let's remember that as we go along. Now when we move to that, what you'll see, the best picture I think you might see is this representation that was widely used by the applicant with regards to this new proposal. It's a seagull's eye view. It looks at the plant here. It shows Arla, the Arla dairy here. I believe they are making a representation to object also. Thank you to them and to everybody who's done this. This just looks like a neat little footprint on a piece of land that's already been given across for as an employment zone and for industrial use. And it suggests, does it not, with railways in the background and everything else, that this is just an industrial area. In actual fact, the fields immediately above here have planning permission for new housing. There's new housing all the way around planned, and it will continue. The Ham up here is already a densely populated area, and there are many more just on the other side of the railway bridge. We have the new Spinnaker development, many thousands of houses coming into Westbury in the near future. Again, I'm not going to go through any of the arguments, health and safety, where water would come from in the event of accidents. Hills have a disastrous record when it comes to accidents, fires, flies, explosions. We've had deaths at the plant. I'm not going to go into any of those arguments. That's all been said. That's all a matter of public record. Please look into it. The point here is that the view you're looking at here, and admittedly this is a representation of what's there, it doesn't suggest that there are any, I believe they're referred to as local receptors. It's a very unpleasant and spurious term that refers to human beings. Now we have human receptors. We have how many? We have, I think it's in excess of 18,000 human receptors living within a 5-minute drive of this plant, this proposed plant, should I say. Children, adults, elderly, infirm, many care homes in Westbury, and all of these human receptors have names, every single one of them. And let's be a little bit more clear about what we're dealing with here. Now this is the plant. Right down in the corner here is Arla. It's a massive building. It can be seen right the way across this valley, Wiltshire, from Bratton Camp up on the hill, right the way across through Bradford and Avon. You can look across. You cannot not see Arla, a white building, and the building that's going in this piece of scorched earth in front. This is the existing MBT, the Hills. I believe it's called the MBT. It's a sorting station for rubbish. Most people in the town and area are all in favour of a recycling centre, some form of, very complex, highly complex recycling centre indeed. Incineration should never be on the cards anywhere, we believe, but certainly not so close to our town. This is our town. This is where we live. This is the escarpment that's referred to, and again, I'm not going to go into any of those details. There are many hundreds of pages written about the escarpment and the reason that temperature inversion means that if you have an incinerator or any form of chimney in this area, any pollutants are going to rise, they're going to fall, they're going to create very dangerous areas for the human receptors, pardon me, otherwise known as human beings, men, women and children who live here. They live here. They live very, very close to this plant. This is our ground zero right here. This is it. Now, if you're looking at this from the town, this is what you'll see. This is not a computer generation or any form. This is an actual photograph taken about, I think, about 6 months ago. Looking across from one side of Westbury, right across Westbury here, all of the houses in one area. You've got the existing sorting station here. You've got Arla dairies here. Now, I doubt very much whether you, as members of the Strategic Planning Committee, will see any of these, any visuals so clear as this tomorrow. This is the reality of what we're dealing with here. This is Arla. This is a massive building. You can see it from anywhere in our region, anywhere. And yet, my hand here representing the incinerator, insert incinerator here, directly between the sorting station and Arla. Arla will be almost obliterated by this. You'll only be able to see, I think, just the far end here from this view, the far end, because the incinerator will be in the way. This is saying nothing of the extra lorry traffic, any of the other associated issues with incineration, precautionary principle or anything else. I'm not going to go into any of those. So let's talk about, pardon me, let's talk about people. Let's talk about what are loosely referred to as the human receptors of Westbury, because the arguments for refusal are utterly compelling. And as unitary councillors, you'll be aware that it is your ultimate responsibility as elected and paid members of the Unitary Council representing the Strategic Planning Committee, and in this instance voting on a very highly complex issue. Many of you are new to this position, I know, as the elections were only in May, and I believe you are in an entirely ludicrous, been put in an entirely ludicrous position to vote on this. You will not be, I will doubt very much whether you will be prepared for the level of complexity based on the, I mean, the decision should be very clear. It should be a refusal, but expertise is really called for on this. We, as just members of the community here, have been gauging our own expertise over the last 5-6 years, and it's quite frightening. So how could I expect any one of you, especially as new members to this committee, to fully understand the implications of what it is you'd be voting on today? So let me say to you firstly, before we continue, I utterly urge you to refuse this on the many thousands of pages of objections which sadly have been distilled down to a very poor representation of 3/4 of a page on Andrew Guest's report, is my understanding. But given that, that's what you have in front of you, and I don't believe that's enough. I don't believe that's nearly enough. And if you feel that you are unable to make a decision on the basis of, and the understanding here that you may not have full access to all that you need to make a rational decision about what will be affecting people's lives, certainly for the next 20 to 30 years, in a world, again, well, I won't even touch on the global warming aspects or any of that. You should be fully up to speed on that. Wiltshire's own policies suggest that nothing like this should even be considered in Wiltshire, let alone be going to planning today. So there are many anomalies which suggest that I shouldn't even have to be making this this video, but I thought I would make clear a few things. And that is that I fully understand that this is a complex decision for you. I feel that if you feel you cannot make the correct decision, which will be to refuse, that you certainly should not leave this to the Secretary of State. It will be called in regardless, but the Secretary of State will pass it back, will suggest that it's a matter that should be made locally, and as it's Wiltshire Council that's put this forward, and indeed moved to approve, bizarrely, that it will then go ahead, and that will somehow be something that wasn't your decision or on your heads. Well, it is on your heads, I'm afraid. It's absolutely on your heads. You are where the buck stops. You're elected to be the bridge between community and the council, and it is your utter responsibility to take that responsibility seriously. So if you cannot find it within your hearts or within the intellect acquired as a result of studying, which I hope you have studied as much as you've been given, and certainly not just the recommendation report, which is lacking in more areas than I could talk about for a week, an utter disgrace, but again I won't go into that in detail. Then you have an alternative, and the alternative is to say we simply cannot go forward and vote on this today. This needs more time. This needs much more time. This needs the document created by the proposing officer needs to be amended to take into account the many thousands of pages of professional input, as opposed to the 6 speakers which you'll see today, or you'll see tomorrow rather, and 6 speakers will have, I think, 3 minutes each to put forward a case. This isn't debating society. These are people's lives at stake, and I don't need to reinforce just how serious that is. So I understand where you're at. I understand how difficult this is, but please bear in mind that we simply have one man, the case officer, who's put forward this this move to approve to you all, and he has a line manager. And you know what? That's where the buck stops. So basically 2 people, as a result of the very complex relationship that an involved relationship that Wiltshire Unitary Council has had with Hills Group over the years. There are millions of pounds worth of contracts at stake here. This is a private company, Hills, and you're dealing with public money, and you are public representatives. And yet, it is just 2 people, as I've just mentioned, that are basically giving this, as the newspapers refer to it, the green light. Well, let me just remind you now as to the 1,638 human receptors that are Westbury Gasification Action Group / no Westbury Incinerator. And as we do this, what I'm going to do is I'll just put this image back up in front of you. There are, as I said, over 1,600 people, and bearing in mind that the 6 people who are allowed to speak against this all have just 3 minutes. I wonder how long it would take to read out the names of as many of our group as I can get through. So, in utter respect to the community power of all individuals who have put forward many thousands of pages of highly complex and passionate pleas with regards to health, putting forward their points of view according to allowable information from the council, following all necessary rules, not bending rules. All necessary rules have been followed. And yeah, you know, one or two of these are just literally, I don't want it here, thank you very much, not in my backyard. But you know what? That might be one out of 1,000. Most are highly, highly complex and with good reasons. All those good reasons which you should know about, and if you don't know about, you must defer this decision to a later stage. But I urge you very strongly to refuse it. So, I urge you to refuse this on behalf of Robert Young, Nuna Nova, Sue McAllister, Neil Webley, Holly, Denise Myers, Tony Dunn, Amber Gormley, Perry Perry, Richard Sampson, Avril Major, Harriet Breeze, Rachel Howard, Catherine Rees, Lorna Wilson, Sarah Ranger, James Samuel, Catherine Brewer, I know Catherine, thank you Catherine, Michelle Tolley, Kate Hicks, Wendy Eaton, Kirsty Karakian, Alice Georgia Cottle, Jay Palmer, Maxine Nurden, Beverly Joyce, Gemma Lee Cox, Martin Hayden, Dave Story, Jan Walker, Hazel Jeffries, Kate Barber, Jenny Jones, Carl Ivan Maddox, Drew Blaze, Chrissy Marshall, David Laura Foster, Dorinda Russ, Chloe Begley, Mark Norris, Jamie Swift, Donna McCann, Demi Osborne, Barry Nutt, Nigel Chantley, Vicky Rowe, Beth Pinnell, Poppy Foss, Marion Titt, Dave Wilson, Sarah Hunt, Abby Gazzard, Rebecca Jane Hodges, Peter Bloomfield, Megan Wilkes, Liz Davis, Paul McGinchley, Michael Obb, Lucy Harper, Andrew Waring, Emma James Stock, Vicky Jones, Lynn Carroll, Kate Locke, Kate Davey, Adam Cole, Przemysław Świdivol, I hope I pronounced that properly, Jane Kerslake, Rose Elizabeth, John Cryer, Sue Costello, Matthew Friend, Siona Griffiths, Diane Louise Cousins, Soan Sweetley, Sally Kershaw, Lee Harris, Emma Watts, Brian Turk, Keith Fowler, Philippa Zilfa Maslin, Deborah Painting, Tamar Pittman, Andrew Philip Mexielaros, David Cavill, thank you David, he's one of yours I believe, Miriam Rose Calvert, Martin Casey, Karen Simpson, Sylvia Rose, Lynn Turner, Iluna Boda, Amy Foskett, Lee Sharman, Jacqueline Lafferty, Marius Boda, Crispy Mike, Christian Kit, Jenny Simpkin, Martin Brian Turk, Melanie Jacob, Mark Cartwright, Nell Roberts, Chris Roberts, Linda Young, Tom Stewart, Annette S.J., Harriet Florence Silcox, Hayley Louise Roscoe, Emma Darlington, Ria Grist, Isabella Boo, Emily Takar, Zoe Stockley, Graham Riley, Chris Biggins. I don't think the Christopher Biggins, but nonetheless could be. Thank you, Chris. I'll do the time warp anytime you like, mate. Kelly Ewans, Reagan Coles, Andrea Knight, Sasha Silverstone, June Cook, Sebastian Moore, Linda Blythe, Michelle Talentine Strout, Jenny Mengham, Alan Wielden, Ian Betteridge, Rihanna Display, Maria Hardiman, Lorna Clare, Samuel Cooper. Are we at 3 minutes yet? Thank you to Diana Concliffe, Henry Christine Vacu, Merrick Cox, Hazel Shelbourne, Chelsea Smith, Luke Sinak, Jonathan Hudson, Lucy Hubbard, Cherry Ively, Lauren York, Sandra Rose, Ian Evans, Paul Bouyer, Eva McHugh, Jodie Locke, Veronica Watkins, Tom Connor, Lisa Gillingham, Ellie Roberts, Joe Blick, Monica Hornby, Agnes Speculate, Dave Hodge, pardon me, Dennis Barney, Tracy Masters, Annette Pierce. Tracy Barney appears twice. That's okay, that's the only one so far. Maybe there's two of you, Tracy. William Reynolds, Tim Hill, thank you, Tim, and thank you for all your support. David Jenkins, same to you, sir. Betsy Sherrod, Sarah Davey, Tomasz Kubik, Nigel Elms, Ian Bartlett, Barry McLaughlin. Remember, this is just some of the people that have objected as we go forward. Sam Zemro, Will Ayrton, Alexis McGiven, Kim Clifford, Paul Mitchell, Melissa Randall, Jane Cryer, Georgia Coggan, Jenny Exor, Tony Kirby, Lynn Knight, Becky Fryer, Michael Bister, John Preeler, Kate Law, Kevin Collins, Lisa Hall, Steve Dodd, Judy Hawkes, Glenn Hart, Sam Nitz, as we approach 11:15 the day before the Judgment Day for Ground Zero, Rebecca Kershaw, Anita Bowater, Kate Flaws, Sam King, Richard Yates, Michael Cooper, Ross Pears, Steve Lucas, Darren Starling, Sian Strand, Paul Pierce, Kevin Norville, Mel Thompson, Derek Jones, Sarah Jane Palmer, Lauren Pinkett, Anne Walton, Rav McGregor, Graham Walton, Gemma Goff, Roger Sumner, Holly Wirtz, Ruth Collins, Sharon Jones, Sarah Louise Wilton, Kane Scott, Kay Flanagan, Robin Carpel, Sharon Coward, Lou Stallard, Jason White, Judy James, Peter Woods, David Pike, Tash Jane Morris, Gillian Lamb, Jonathan Campbell, Lynn Leather, Amber May, Kimmy Kie, sorry Kimmy Kie, sorry Kimmy, it's a lovely name, Nikki Diaman, Angela Grist, Tom Solman, Samantha Feeney, Leander Morales, the man, the legend, Angie Stevens Carter, Mike Birkin, Nikki Hudd, Joy Chantry, Sally Ann Gates, Terry Paul Saunders. Let me just remind you at this point, I don't know how many minutes in, I'm literally reading out the names of some of the people that have made complex objections to their unitary councillors, so that their unitary councillors can do their job and act on their behalf of the bridge between community and council, to make sure that the council are fully aware of all heartfelt and well educated and informed objections to this plant, this appalling plant. Now, we continue. Let's just change here. We continue. Let's look at the pigeon's eye view. All right. Now that's probably the best picture you'll ever get from the case officer. I think the one that I like best is the one that's filmed from the ditch. Just next door there's a field and there's a ditch, and if you take a photograph from the bottom of that ditch, it makes it look a little bit like an industrial plant in the middle of nowhere. And I think that's probably the one, as members of the Strategic Planning Committee, that you have been given most access to. I wonder how many pages have been written about that. We continue. Thank you for your input. Emma Smith, Tony Lowe, Robert Goff, Kate Blagden, Nick Davey, Isabella Basin, Yvette Harding Black, Richard Patterson, May Lewoe, Michael Roberts, Kay Pollock, Lucy Hyde, Keith Barney, Paul Fife, Joe Lambert, Sue Evans, Amy Smith, Lee Cotterill, Robert Hewish, Jack Privet, Liam Keevil, Bethany Keevil, Harry Cotterill, Caroline North, Rob Keevil, Joanne Barry, Vanessa Button, Tiz Wheeler Weymouth, Nikki Doughty, Sam Shaw, Rachel Holloway, Ellen Harvey, Sean Scragg, Emily Wadds, Sean A.C. Fletcher, Susan Brown, Alfie Barnett, Rob Smith, Jamie HGM, Tracy Mock, Gemma Gordon, Matthew Rowe, Fatima Zunudan, Rhiannon Haya, Kelly White, Emma Day, Karen Osgrant, Zoe Laspinaza Spinetti, Zoetta Laspinaza Spittellini, another beautiful name, Zoetta, Sally Ann Martin, Danielle J. Lewis, Matthew Craddock, Lee Fitzhenry, Fallon Emily, Jade Tanswell, Teresa Harding, Derek Sager, Mafanwi J. Miller, Alison Cresswell, Deborah Airy, John Linkins, Carol Walker, Maureen Walker, Annie Jones, Mike Deacon, Carol Holder Mead, Vicky Fitzhenry Rowe, Joe Neat, Hannah Webber, Kelly Suzanne Jarvis, Lisa Giles, Pamela Glanville, Carl von Clausewitz, Sue Sidey, Sharon Hall. Can I just remind you at this stage that everybody whose name has been read out here all agreed that they were in absolute opposition to this proposal before they joined the group, and the vast majority of them and 1,000 others have made detailed reports in the public domain that members of the Strategic Planning Committee should all be aware of. And if you're not, don't just take your case officer's recommendation for granted. Things are structured in a certain way and they're presented in a certain way. And when they're presented in a certain way, you see things that are not always, well, they're not always as they should be. For example, you don't see the town and the beauty from Bratton Camp looking down, even with the Arla building there. You can see the Arla building from anywhere. But the amazing thing about that is soon you won't be able to from Westbury, unless you make the correct decision, members of the Strategic Planning Committee, the correct decision, which would be to refuse for the many reasons that you should be very clear about. And if for any reason as a result of the case recommendation you're not clear about these, then you must move to delay or defer this decision, because you would not have been in a situation to be fully clued up about everything that you should be. And if that is the case, I fully understand. I fully understand that. But it must then be deferred. But we would urge you to refuse. Thank you to Emily Cottle, Maria Befaux, Amy Bates, Colm Davis, Gary Proser, Josh Whitaker, Mark Torfey Mead, Ria Raymond, Andrew Meaden, Anna Philippa Perea, Debbie Michelle Kerfoot, Cassie McGlinchey, Louise Koshlicki, Steve North, Alison Meader, Christine Heron, Jason Rose, Michelle Moore, Dinah Martinez Topper, Paul David Gilbert, Jason Sweeney, Sarah Beck, Charlie Barnett, Cherise, that's a beautiful triple name there, Cards Plus of Westbury, many thanks to you and for distributing our posters. Sean Law, Lisa Turner, Caroline Luckham, Badger Thorne, Andy Jordan, Samantha Stevens, Jackie Dumbrell, Amy Davis, Matt Kozlicki, Denise Johnson Woods, Becky Mazzani, Kelly Campbell, Philip Fry, Sabrina Montgomery, Brad Matthew Watkins, Adrian Curtis, Susan Hunt, Katie Gutteridge, the legend that is Terry Morgan, another one, Katie Tara Fry, Neil Miller, Henry Griggs, Terry O'Shaughnessy, Rich Rogers, thank you to Kirsten Brooks, Belinda Capstaff Taylor, Shannon Thomas, Tom Derenge, Elaine Powell, Andrew Skyme, Janie Brown, Laura Arnold, Esther McManus, Gemma Hanna, Joyce Jones, Emma Reed, Helen Keniston, Luke Cleverly, Lyndall Marie Clare, Jackie O'Rourke, Claire Puntis, Annie Clare, Kim Robinson, Rich Stevens, Debbie Griffiths, Sandra Sevier, Paul Jones, Lynn Gill, Claire Joanne, Natasha Jane Penny, Marie Pettinger, Anna Marie Bacori, Phoebe Rose, Becky O'Brien, Sandra Haywood, Lorraine Litter, Neil Martin, Julie Osmond. Are we more than 3 minutes? Sorry, was that my speaking over with by now? I'm only reading out the names, not what they'd all love to say. Thank you to Chantel Howe, Sarah Kotevsky, Nikki Kiss, beautiful name, Charlie Moxham, Melissa Linkins, Rachel Victoria Mullins. Thank you, Sarah Yeadon, Melanie Savidis, Sophie Hall, Mike Coles, Melissa Hibbard, Paul Galney, Kirsty Gainey, Emma Latham, Rachel Peters, Anita Reeves, Gemma Busvine, Sabrina Brewer, Mary Edwards, Kerry Chant, Kim Legg, Caroline Phillips, Claire Marsh, David Shears, Mercedes Jill, Stephen James Dell, Simon Cooksey, Rachel Jones, Sophie Fiona Peters, Sandra Glover, Georgie Burbridge, Cesar Mosquera, Lisa Bryant, Danielle Walkinshaw, Dave Griffin, Lisa Chapman. Oh my goodness. Well, it's 11 o'clock. Lisa Chapman. How long's that been going for? Maybe 20 minutes? 6 times 3 is 18 minutes. So the entire representation of objectors tomorrow allowed considerably less time than I've taken so far just to read out some names. Well, goodness. Thank you to Ronnie Pearson, Joe Stott, Ian Grunsell, Lauren Griffiths, Alan Mead, Sam Nutt, Sue Gray, Maddie Oram, Graham Lever, Sharon Steve Chesterton, Joe Hanlon Moores, Maggie K. Butler, Caroline West, Val Hampshire, Holly Davidson, Dean Padfield, Debbie Watson, T. Meld, Shell Lewis, Vicky Radford, Sarah Palmer, Kat Marsin, Jennifer Johnson, Rachel Pescod, Graham McNally, Hazel Mead, Andy Anderson, Liz Lee, Stuart Love, Liz Christie. Do you know, any one of these people, you could pick out an objection at random and read through it. And at the very least, as their representative, you should be giving credence to every word, responding to that person and letting them know why, if you intend to vote in favour of this, why their opinion doesn't matter, why anything they may have said is somehow less important than the findings of one Wiltshire employee under the line managementship of another to promote burning of industrial waste from almost anywhere, very little domestic waste, very little recycling, very little that's renewable, for the profit of private industry for the next 25 years. Thank you to Vicky Y. Why indeed, Vicky? Why indeed? Peter Ashby, George Radbourne, Jude Lamb, John Rickards, B. Brodie, Daniel Spencer, Sarah Cooper, Katie Norris, Paul and Phil Stokes, Helen Newman, Samantha Rawlings, Matthew Luke Jones, Louise Gregory, Becky Ellen, George Edmund, Justin Watley, Peter Knott, Claudia Balanzinska, Amy Chadwick, Zara Rowlands, Dave Cooper, Joe and Dave Longhurst, Annette Sawyer, Sonia Harris, Jack Loader, Bev Slark, Sean James. Thank you to Sandy Michelle Hillier, Lanny Hall, Valerie Bias, Andrea Walton, Sarah Norville, Luke Painter, Tug Wilson, Sandra Reed, Mariah Newman, Jackie Rideout. Remember, these are just some of the 1,638 names, the vast majority of which have made complex and passionate pleas and objections in writing to Wiltshire Council, possibly on numerous occasions. to object to this. These are just the names. As members of the Strategic Planning Committee and the bridge between community and council, it's your job to know what these people have said, why they've said it, and how you can answer them. As I said, it's my understanding that all of these views have been honed down to 3/4 of a page of bullet points. Let's continue with the names. Jackie Rideout, Matt Balaam, Deborah Bow. Thank you to Andrew Jackson, Andrea Louise Harris, Mel Elway, Richard Black, Charlotte Billett, Paul Humphrey, Lester Pell, Chris Harvey, Adrian Kwasniaki, Claire Bryant, Helen Barnes, Diana, Eleanor Vinter, Kirsty Ashcroft, Claire Kingswell, Cassie Wilmot, Louise Macaulay, Alec Cadzow, who I'm sure and I hope will be saying something to his boss about saying something more about this in future, and not simply referring this for the views of the Secretary of State, which, as we've already made quite clear, although I'm sure very worthy and honourable, would simply refer back after a call-in, would refer back to this decision must be made locally. And by locally, he does not mean by the names that I'm reading out here. So let me continue with those names. Nikki Truman, Sean Main, Sandy Jones. Thank you to Ella Pierce. Kay Finbow, related to Charlie, I would imagine there, Kay. Lovely man he was. Andrew Windsor, Nicola P. Leach, Ellie Green, Tony Laberman, Scarlett West, John Cricket, Amy Kelly, Tina Devereaux, the great Tina Devereaux, Maggie Parsons, pardon me, Josh Charles, Steve Wells, Zelda Nichols, Leonie Jarville, Mandy Murray, Tom Ford, Judy Gibson, Mark Gibson, Sam Gunston, Thomas Peter Takiro, Nicholas William Bailey, Louise Ramsey, Paul Fallows, Linda Blythe, Linda Cooper, Liz Gifford, Jean Phillips, Nina Parmenter, Rob Fox, Angie Gibbs, Anthony R. Mansfield, Emily Pomeroy Smith, Michael J. Amos, Anne Spencer, John Bister. Many people, many names in there who have been very active in opposing this incinerator and the gasification plants put before it. Worth remembering that planning permission was given for a gasification plant that was never built. There'll be many arguments pro. I can't go into any of the arguments. I'm just trying to read the names out so that you know how many people are involved here and how many people have made these impassioned pleas. So let us continue as we look across from Westbury to the site of, I think, what can only be described as a cathedral of doom, which would be directly in between here, the MBT plant here, and the Arla Dairy, producers of Anchor Butter, proudly in Westbury. Anchor Butter. What special added particulates could Anchor Butter have from now on? And I'm sure they'll be talking about this in great detail to you. But they're just an industrial company trying to make a profit next door. I feel sorry for them. I feel for their situation. But what I'm doing here is I'm just reading out the names of the people, just the names of the people who have submitted their objections for you, the Strategic Planning Committee, each of you who have been elected and paid to be that bridge between community and council, and in this instance vote on a very, very complex planning application which is being recommended very spuriously by one employee, as I presume instructed to do so and helped along the way to do so by his line manager. Two people, just two people, two paid employees. They're not elected in any way, but you are. You as the Strategic Planning Committee are elected, and you're elected for a reason. I'm not going to go into the details as to why you should refuse this from the health and safety perspective. Even from that alone, that's a very good reason, just on health and safety. The council have the ultimate thing for them to do is to protect the population of Wiltshire, and it could be argued very highly that they're not doing that by encouraging this. And then there's all the other things. But let us return to the names and thank Emma Chappell, Karina Simons, Bill Bailey, Emma Eden, Hugh Buckley, Andy McLaughlin, Bruce Maskery, Dave Wilkin, David Cook, Ali Veerman, Roy Murray, Karen Wilkin, Dan Payton, Amy Bates, James Archard, Stuart Paul McEverly, Sophie Delunty Allsop, Heather Lackmaker, Jean Bethard, Susie Gibson, Jacob Weatherly, Chell Paslow, Fraser Gard, Kevin Deeber, Rebecca Hardwick, Rachel Helen, Lauren Long, Paula Windsor, Tara Jacobs, Connie Gallagher, Matthew Thorne, Alexa Roberts, who has given much information and support, a doctor and PhD. If you're going to read just one, have a look at that one. But read them all, actually. Read them all. But if you wanted to have a cursory glance at one objection, Alexander Roberts would be a good one to start with. Craig Cameron, thank you. Dorinda Russ, Spencer Chewis Allen, Ken Wilson, Neil Blance, Richard John Pugsley, Kirsty Fail, Sarah Barker, Beth Ann Proctor, David Bullock, Alison Shears, Jules JB, Teresa Harris, Beatrix Trixie Deegan, Kelly Williams, Julia Bister, Ria Painter Coates, Alison Jackson. Thank you, Kirsty Higgins. Thank you, Kat Chapman. Thank you, Grant Ryland. Trisha Thorley, Barbara Webber, Samantha Lucy Duerden, Jane Begley, Tracy Butt, Tamina Swan, Hugh Davis, David Hancock, Dan Alexander James, Matt Dean, speaking tomorrow I believe, now a councillor in Westbury, Nicola Newman, Catherine Higgins, Leanne Newley, Kerry Carpenter, Chris Giles, Mandy Eardley. Thank you, Fiona Miller, Julia Young, Gary Walker, Claire Barnfather, Jill Davis. Thank you, Daisy Froggatt, Emma Smith, Rebecca Gibson, Eve Grist, Emma Simmons, Kelly Coffin, Paul Elkins, Alison MacDonald, Gavin, HGM, David Wood. Thank you, Chris Drenge, Lucy Hale, Holly Short, Simon Stiddard. I'm sure I'm past 3 minutes now. Yeah, no one stopped me. Okay, I'll carry on for a minute. Just the names. Just the names. Every name has a family and a household behind it. Old people, young people, children at school, babies just brought into the world. Maybe they've just moved here. Maybe they're moving to one of the many new housing plots being built all around the site where this incinerator is. Maybe they've lived here for years and been plagued by fires and flies and smells and odours from the existing Hills Group plants. Everybody understands that rubbish is a bit of a dirty, smelly business, and there's things that need to be done with it. I'm not going to go into any of the details as to what can be done with it, because they've already been written by many greater people than myself. I am just one voice, and I'm using my voice today to give the voice to Holly Short. Thank you, Holly. Simon Stiddard, Ian Sanders, Kate Linegar, Terry Stone, Nicola Stiddard, Joanne Archer, Rachel Ryan, Paddy Neat, Susan Dorr, Tim John Ryan, Sam Tucker, Shane Byrne, Nicole Toogood, Becky Saunders, Catherine Easton Townsend, Gemma Hartigan, Sarah Louise Pringle-Smith, Kath Duerden, Dave Parry, Kim Netherton, Pete Vincent, Jonathan Street, S.J. Wright, Stacey Henry, Catherine Fry, Bethany Button, S.J. Davis, Holly Meek, Kevy Boom, Heidi Daly, Peter Meek, Nadine Short, Claire Cotterill, Katie Spencer, Pat Harper, Michael S. Constable, Donna Pellier, Kai Harrington, Sheila Harris, pardon me, Penelope Bernstring, Becky Ford, Judy Scull, Karen Levitt, Henry James Mason, Kyle Scannion, Hayley Munro, Neil Hawker, Grant Truckle, Steve Bennett. Just the names, not all the words that they've written for your attention, members of the Strategic Planning Committee. Just the names of the people that have done that. Sean Milton, Bill Youngs, Connor Bohanna, thank you Connor, James Button, Tracy Bartham, Robin Mark, Claire Loader, Liz Kingston, Deborah Cunliffe, Reed Bowden Hazel, Kizzy Kent, Dawn Wilmot, Richard Evans, Cavan Algar, Phoebe Simmons, Gordon Ian King, thank you for your continued support, Gordon, Sandra Powell, Ash Stratton, Thom Ed, John Jennings, Sharon McPartland, Howard Meaden, Mark Bailey, Benedict Coulthard, Nick Mead, Thomas McPartland, Andrew Pillage. Is it fair to remind you at this point that this is just the social media wing? This is just the Facebook group. Just names. So what you're hearing here are just the names that use social media. I know from some of the work I've done, myself and my colleagues, with WGAG over the years, that we have a mailing list of approaching 200 as well, people who aren't on social media at all. And they would have all written to you too. Have you seen those ones? Maybe I'll dig those names out in a minute. But in the meantime, we'll return just to some of the people of Westbury and the surrounding area who have objected in writing that you, as members of the Strategic Planning Committee, must, as your job, act as a bridge between yourselves as elected officials by them, paid for by us, to represent them in your capacity as unitary councillors and your capacity as members of the Strategic Planning Committee. A very difficult and trying job, and we genuinely appreciate and understand the complexity of this, which is why I'm simply reminding you not of what the words that have been said. That's a matter of public domain. You can check these any time, and indeed the case officer should have made you very aware of these in a recommendation. Did he not? Oh. My understanding is that all of these names and all of the information associated with all of these names that have been given have been whittled down to 3/4 of a page of bullet points in a otherwise what can only be described as an expected document of detritus, which the newspapers have described as giving the green light to this privately funded project to burn waste from almost anywhere on our doorsteps. On our doorstep. Insert incinerator here. For the next 30 years, I could say how personally unhappy I am about this, and I could tell you about the many, many points that I've personally raised, but I'm not going to. I'm simply going to thank Nick Mead, Thomas Partland, Andrew Pillage, Sarah Macduff, Bola Ia Ibea, Hazel Hall, John Dole, Carolyn May, Teresa Brewer, Farron Jury, Mel Charlton, Alexis Harris, Brad Collier, Mike Hill. That's an interesting one. Not that Mike Hill, I don't think. Vicky Wheeler, Jonathan Fry, Niall McPartland. Again the legend that is Sean Crocher. Tristan Strange, Rosalind Smith, Lois Griffin, Sue Tripp, Stephen Doty, Debbie Holland, Maria Cricket, Mary Honey, Tom Lomax, Edith Bass, Helen Bailey, Helen Kay, Joe Hansted, Pippa Birch. Thank you to Tessa Slack, Lucinda Pickford, the great Lucinda Pickford. Thank you, Lucinda. Alex Kay, Hayden Lee, Tom Newton, Luke Heppels, Chris Lewis, Sarah Barrett, Brent Pullen, Chris Keevil, Try Stand Smart, Anne Slater, Joe Buck, Clara Woodcock, Abrid Moe, Kate Knight. Some amazing information put forward by Kate and her husband. Thank you to them. John Cromwell, Natalie Long, Tracy Parker. I could say this about any individual. If I'm saying any additional words about any of these, just because I happen to know about these ones myself. But all of these names that I'm reading out here have all made their own carefully worded objections. Thank you to Tracy Parker, Brian Wilkinson, Vicky Marshall, Jane Arton, Anne-Marie Doughty, Christine Jenkins, Annette Laws, Lynn Verso, Nathan Andrew Coulson, Yash Davis, Hannah Beth Cradlick, Pete Cousins, Britta Goodman, Thomas Hulbert, Chris Dobrzinski, Yakshamash Chris, Nikki Sanderson, Jacqueline Forecast, Simon Folks, Stephen Dowell, Claire Thompson. Thank you, Glenn Middleton, Sarah Middleton, B.D. Clark, Liam Henry, Heather Rose, Brendan O'Regan. Not just names. People with families, with loved ones, with children, going to school here, buying property here, concerned about the health of their loved ones here. Are you, members of the Strategic Planning Committee? I know you'll be concerned about the health of your own family. These are just the names of the people in Westbury. The names of the people who live in these houses immediately adjacent to what is proposed to be a moving grate incinerator, commercially burning waste that could come from almost anywhere in Europe and around the world, as we know when you read between the lines. The mission to build this, a mission that will have mission creep associated. The statistics you're presented with, they'll change. As soon as permission goes through, those things change. And remember, as we said, if you defer that to the Secretary of State, all that will happen is it will continue to come back, because they will say quite clearly that this is a decision which the government believes should be made locally. And by locally, they mean a decision made by your case officer and his line manager. That's what they mean by that. But let me tell you about the people that do matter. Just their names, not what they've written. Thank you to Heather Rose, Brendan O'Regan, Michelle Meadow, Kate Hulbert, Ross Rutt, Ewan Jones, Carolyn Hillman, Stuart Caldo, Oliver Chambers, Linda Jane Richards, Donna Thorne, Amelia Dowell, Erin Lambert, Pamela Dowell, Caitlin Simmons, Sarah Pugsley. Thank you, Jake Merlin Messenger, Jackie ML, Ollie White, Barry Cromwell, Harold Henderson, Sally Hassleton. Thank you to Eleanor Field, Pete Turner, Stephanie Cutland, Sophie O'Neill. Thank you, Luke Walsh, Sean Hennigan, Charlie Sweetman, Cara. Thank you to KS Motors in Wiltshire, well, in Westbury. And the lads there, I know them, lads and lasses, I know quite well. Thank you to Avon Needs, Sean Hennigan, Stephanie Laslett, Mel Clark, Julie Phillips, Hannah Curley, Sid Ridley, Mariah Appleyard, Jessica George, James White, Ken Price. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Ed Lambert Munger, Neil George, Thomas Hiscox, Keris Freeman, Heather Whitlis Whitmore, Glenys Marie Ozenturk. Thank you to Jenny Gilling, Maggie Detmar, Donna Cook, Dave Knight, James Hubbard. Thank you, Jay Smith, for your contributions. Thank you, Lindsay Dowell. Thank you, Mariana Baccaral. Thank you to all of the representations of the local political parties, of which we've had members of all objecting outright and writing. Anne Newing, thank you. Gemma Satchma, thank you. Zoe Newing Moore, thank you. Thank you to Karen Bell, Carol Peacock, Julia Hidsteck, Councillor Stuart Palman. Thank you, Mel Moden, Eleanor Lishakovsky. Thank you, Jed Byrne, Charlotte James, Matt Calloway, Nick. Thank you, Jane Russ, another local councillor here. Not sure whether she'll be speaking tomorrow. She might be. Thank you, Danny McGree. Thank you, Ellen Nicholson, Vicky Rashid, G. Hayward Smith, Holly Rattley, Jamie Daps Devlin, John Lancaster, Beth Jones, Kate Menachik, Barney Jones. Thank you, Sarah Roberts. Thank you, Paul St. Range. Thank you, Nick Unsworth. Thank you, Martin Plowright. Ashley Russell, Brian Short, David Nolan, Lisa Wilson. Well, you know, what are we at now? I've no idea. If I'm just reading out the names, the individuals who have all within their own all by their own volitions written this complex, very complex task as a member of the public to address these things. And we've all, every single one of these names have done their best to do this in a way that is not only heartfelt and gets their point across, but conforms to your rules. The same rules that until just a few days ago only would have allowed 3 people to speak for 3 minutes. 3 people for 3 minutes. And yet, those so-called unbendable rules have been bent now for 6 people for 3 minutes. Well, I'm just one of a group of 1,638 people. Just one. And all I'm doing is reading their names so that you know who they are. Thank you, Martin Plowright. Thank you, Ashley Russell, Brian Short, David Nolan. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you. Thank you, Ashley White. Thank you, Andy Jolliffe. Sonia Johansson. Tom Corbin. Claire Ralph. Helen Baker. Brenda Wise. Gretchen Tucker. Brendan Eardley. Kaylee Marie. Thank you, Kaylee. Thank you very much. Now, if I was talking and I suddenly had, you know, a normal, everyday human call of nature, like you do, what would you do? Well, you couldn't just call off the meeting, could you? No, look, this is the door. I live in a house. I'm just a normal person like you. See you in a minute. So, as a normal person, just like you, in this strange world now, we've all got used to turning our offices into studios, doing Zoom meetings and all these various things. I'm not trying to do anything complicated today. This is really simple. This is an honour. This is an honour simply to put forward the names of all of the people who have spent their precious time and their precious energies objecting as officially as they know how to, as members of the public, as you are too, members of the Strategic Planning Committee. You're members of the public too. Some of you might know what Westbury looks like, others might not. Some of you might know that this is the view from Bratton Camp, for example. Beautiful, beautiful Bratton Camp. Westbury is not an industrial wasteland, and we don't want it to become one, but we're not NIMBYs. We've got industry here. Yes, of course we have. You might notice right at the top, about there, you can see a white building. That is Arla Foods, where Anchor butter is made, and they're very proud of the pastures and hills and valleys around here. Of course, they don't really make it clear that they're based on an industrial estate, but it's quite a small one. And what they certainly don't want is for a moving great incinerator in the hands of a company with a, at best, poor safety record, putting forward a project which our MP has suggested should always be referred to the so-called precautionary principle, i.e. if there's any potential for danger, don't put it close to people. Do not put it close to human receptors. How dare you refer to me as a human receptor? I am not a human receptor. I am a member of a very, very lovely and, in my experience, close and caring community. So let us continue. Thank you to Brenda Wise, Gresham Tucker, Brendan Eardley, Karen Moore, Robin Jones, Dave Hickory, Robert Page, Ashley Brewer, Heidi Jones, Zoe Scott, Miriam Tristan Taylor, Natalie Carpenter, Louisa King, let us return to what we can expect. And remember that this was the refused plant. This plant was refused on scale alone. Largely because on that day the councillors were advised, if they wanted to refuse it, that was one of the grounds they should refuse it on. It's all terribly intricate, and I do genuinely sympathise with your position as members of a committee that make these decisions. But remember, it's your decision to make. The recommendation that's been given to you was by one employee of the council, who works very closely with his line manager, who in turn, for many years, have worked very closely with Hills Group, a private company profiting from taxpayers' money continually. If I was being cynical, I would say it was a very unhealthy relationship, and in many respects puts forward a conflict of interests in any member of the council having anything to do with decisions based around this. But your decision, elected members of the Strategic Planning Committee, it's your decision. And in your capacity as acting as a bridge between community and council, you should move to refuse this permission. And if you don't feel you can move to refuse this permission, as the clock strikes 11:45 the day before you have to make that decision, then you need to defer this. Simply, you need to defer this position. You need to defer it to a later time when you feel you have all the information that you need. And in the meantime, I'll just remind you of just the names of people who have all spent many hours on multiple occasions to make it a matter of public record for you to read as to why this should not be in Westbury, so close to our town, which is of upwards of 18,000 people within a 5-minute drive of this site. So thank you to Ashley Brewer, Heidi Jones, Zoe Scott, Miriam Tristan Taylor, Natalie Carpenter, Louisa King, Patrick Randall, Stephen Jones, Katie Baggs, Andy Day. Thank you, Hannah Snowden. Thank you too to Alice Brown, John Pierce, Christine Norris, Lawrence Orchard, Susan Joyce, thank you to Joy Cooper, Karen Park, Jackie Bowles, Crystal Walsh, Sarah Harris, Lisa Irwin, Marie Richard Parsons, Debbie Felper. Thank you, Helen Murray. Thank you, Jane Kostelnick. It's been my, I wouldn't say it's been my pleasure, but it has been my sometimes duty, and it's certainly been my pleasure to speak on behalf of, on occasions, the group that represents these wonderful people, of whom I'm just reading their names today. These are just the names. Each of these people have family, they have children, they have elderly relatives, they have loved ones, friends, all living in this so-called industrial wasteland that is Westbury in Wiltshire. Are we special? No, we're not special. We're just a town like anywhere else. But don't be fooled that this is an industrial wasteland on the edge of countryside that is not close to what they're referring to as these many 18,000 plus human receptors. I prefer to call human beings, and very honoured and important members of our community group, and our community power in being together in numbers matters. It really matters, and it's the one thing that as elected councillors you should be only too aware of. I have absolute sympathy with your situations as human beings and people who live elsewhere, and we will be facing similar issues, I'm sure, possibly where you live now. If you were having this on your doorstep, would you be happy about it? Ask yourself that question. So thank you to Claire Harvey, Ashley Collis. Thank you to Nikki Kroski, Jim Cook. Thank you to Lisa Green. Thank you to Peter Eastland. Thank you to Bex Washhill. Thank you to Jake Petrie. Now, so far, you might be interested to know that people will say that there's precedence for principle of development here. And there is, because you've agreed in the past that a gasification plant should be built. Why didn't they build that? Simply put, it is not as profitable as a moving great incinerator. And this is private industry we're talking about here. I'm not a NIMBY, personally speaking, not on behalf of the group, personally speaking, I'm not a NIMBY. And I'm not a Luddite. I'm not scared of technology. I think technology is a marvellous thing. Such dangerous technology in the hands of a company with such a poor safety record, saying nothing of any of the other thousands of pages put forward by these people, whose names I'm mentioning today and others. These people all matter. Every single thing that they say matters. But there are safety records that should be considered. When you're building something so close to the homes, futures and investments of people who have decided to live in this lovely community for whatever reasons, and I thank them. I thank Kay Coleman, I thank Caroline LJ, I thank Suzanne Bray, Nadine Pierce, Kate CT, Rach Button, I thank Sam Goodwin, I thank Amy Anderson, Liana Tugwell, Veronica Minty, thank you Veronica. The sheer weight of numbers, of just names, and I don't know how long I've been talking now, but these are just the names, for goodness sake. How can any individual have the audacity, if nothing else, to the cheek, the barefaced cheek, to distill, as just a paid employee of the council, to distill 2,000 plus complex applications into 3/4 of a page? Of a document that is simply moved to and asking you as representatives of the Strategic Planning Committee, asking you to say, yeah, trust me, yeah, trust my line manager, we're moving to approve this. Yeah, we know what we're doing. We've been in touch with this, we've been working with this company for years. Well, of course they have. I have no doubt that the many, many, many thousands of pages that have been, and the money spent by these companies to try and get this through over the years, I've got, they're perfectly entitled to put this forward. This is the law of the land. No one's stopping them doing it. But it's your job as members of the Strategic Planning Committee, elected officials and paid officials, as a bridge between community and the council, to make sure that all necessary protocols have been taken care of. Not just because somebody tells you, one person and his line manager tells you. You have to genuinely know that what they're telling you is right. And if you don't know that, I understand that fully. I completely understand that you might not know that. In which case you would have to defer this judgment at this time. It would be incorrect of you to do anything other. Don't be fooled that putting this through, allowing it to go to the Secretary of State, and then to come back to be told only that it's a local decision that must be made locally. And that local decision made locally refers to the case officer and his line manager. And the applicant, of course. But not one of the many thousands of people who have sent in detailed objections, including Lania Tugwell, Veronica Minty, Ruth Cook, Emma Lovelock, James Brown, Carol Bishop Uliner, Deb Bullock, Paula Fox, Amy Watley, Patricia Keevil, Delia Aslan, Arulian Boutte. It's these are just the names. They're just the names of these wonderful people who have all taken time out of their incredibly busy days, and you must know what that's like, taking time to try and do a little something to protect their own health, those of their loved ones and their children. Thank you to Alexander Guy Hudson. Thank you to Richard Hill, Dave Andrews, Shirley Needham, Joanne Bartlett, Bonnie Jackson, Teresa Thornton, Ellie Roberts, Jill Mann, you see, I've only got a old computer here. I'm sitting in my little office and I'm just trying to make sure that all of these names are mentioned. Thank you to Alison Irving, Kate Shirley, Kimberly Down, Ria Jane Can, Lucy Travis, Crispin Veal, Holly Plank. Thank you to Tracy Gibbs, Helen Evans, Tom McLachlan. Thank you, Tom. You know, it's a matter of great concern locally. It's often said that Westbury is the last to be helped, and whenever it comes up to election time again, there'll be people say, "Oh, what about the bypass, or what about this?" Well, what about just doing your jobs properly once really well? Move forward as start as you intend to move forward in your new position if you are a new member of the Strategic Planning Committee, and hold those who give you direction to account. Thank you to Darren Wilkie, Claire Harcourt, Kirsty Drenge, Sheila Clements, Scott Dupney, Catherine Thompson, Kelly Martin. Thank you, Karen Alice Gardner. Thank you, Ian Mann. Thank you, Anna Norton. This group has been going since I think 2000 and I think it was 2015 we set this up initially, just to get people together so that people could be heard. Thank you, Kevin Sandover, Zara Marsh, Mel Brown, Sarah Brown, Lynn Bohanna, thank you, Lynn, Sarah Dixon, Mary Kneen, Tom Pilgrim, Beth Mullins, thank you, Sarah Wills. Yes, it seems never ending. Every time some movement is made in a positive direction, the rules are changed, something happens to just pull things into line, and we know categorically that those in strategic planning high up will want this to go ahead. They've always moved to approve these. It's not unusual. I was perfectly ready for this, the move for approval. But it's not their job, it's your job to decide whether this is sensible. Do not be fooled by their direction. Thank you, Neil Francis. Thank you, Gareth Squire, Louise Coke Norris, Campbell Ritchie, Stacey Hopkins. As the clock strikes 12, goodness. I wonder if I'll be finished by the time you start your meeting tomorrow. I don't know, let's see. Thank you, Kiona Player, Debbie Cole, Nick Curzon. Thank you to Barbara Swan. Thank you to Josh Constantine. Thank you, Josh. As my computer is struggling to keep ahead, thank you to Darren Hard, Amy Hewitt Trainer, Martin Brooks, John Jane. Thank you to Mark Whitwood, Craig Mead, Jane Angel. Well, technology being what it is, and at Jane Angel will stop. Not because that was the last one. There's at least another 700, I think, to read out there, at least. But my technology has failed, just like I would expect all technology to fail at some stage. And let's hope that if technology is going to fail, that it doesn't fail under the direction of Hills or North Acre Renewable Energy with their poor track record. And as a private company wishing to make money, who can blame them? The wrong plant at the wrong time in the wrong place. That is what's been said on many occasions, not just by our MP. I mean, look, it's nice to have your MP on board with this, but we're not playing political games, political footballs, political gains. I'm not interested in any of those. I'm interested in making sure that every single member of the Westbury Gasification Action Group / No Westbury Incinerator, and everybody who has taken their time to put forward objections and comments with regards to these many proposals over the many years should be celebrated. And today that's been in name only. So please, no excuses. As members of the Strategic Planning Committee, put your heads together. I hope you've done your research. I hope you've been given access to all information and indeed not just taken direction. Taking direction is simply not good enough on this occasion. You cannot take direction. If you're acting on the recommendation alone, I categorically state to you that that is not sufficient information. And I understand, genuinely understand, that might put you in an embarrassing or a difficult position, especially if you're a new member of the council and you want to impress or do the right thing or be seen to be doing the right thing. But I can assure you, you know, my position is clear under this yellow Westbury No Incinerator sign. But I know this goes on all around the world. I appreciate from a political standpoint and from the difficulty working in local authority that you need to conform to certain ways of doing things, and there's certain procedures and everything else. But the procedures with which you have been furnished with the so-called green light, as the newspapers have referred to it, with regards to the move to approve this plant, is just not sufficient. So if you cannot say with hand on heart that you fully understand and appreciate all of the information and objections made, and I think I've only mentioned something like about 55, maybe 50% of just the names of the people that have spent their time and efforts objecting to this. Not just because they don't want it in their backyard. You know, we live in a modern world. We're not just NIMBYs these days. That is not the case. It's not them and us, as the press would have it. And any members of the press listening to this, please bear that in mind. It's not them and us. It's not just, the people objecting won't be very happy. It's the community that object. You're part of that community, members of the press. Remember that in case it ever comes on your doorstep. This is the wrong plant in the wrong place at the wrong time. I have my personal feelings about it. I'm leaving all of those out of the way now. Let us bear in mind that yes, there's precedence for allowing a gasification works on this site. We believe if that was reviewed now, that wouldn't be the case either, so that precedence is absolutely within anyone's remit to be ruled out and looked into, and suggested that that decision was made at that time for whatever reasons, but with new policy. And waste hierarchy, which I've already referred to here. We've referred to waste hierarchy because when it comes to incineration and landfill, they're right at the bottom. I didn't make this stuff up. This is stuff that was it's council policy. You're not supposed to do it, so don't. Vote correctly and don't do it. Temperature inversion's been talked about as well. I'm not going to talk about any of those things in detail now. We live in on the edge of an escarpment, so any pollution that may be created, you'll hear all of the talk of little particulates, PM1 through PM10s, that people can inhale. If you live on the edge of an escarpment, on certain weather conditions, that's what your babies are breathing in every day. And your husband as he goes to work, your wife as she goes to get the bread every day. That's what they'll be breathing in. Don't be fooled by the pigeon's eye view of a pretty little plant in an industrial wasteland. Be absolutely assured that the reality is that this is, yes, a business employment zone. Well, put up, dare I say, put a recycling station here. We could use one of those. We understand that these things are important, and I know I, for one, when it comes to normal rubbish and the recycling these days, I produce so little landfill waste. I mean, a tiny bag every 2 weeks, tiny, compared to, 3 bins worth of stuff intended for recycling, not as incinerator food. And be aware that the people of Westbury and Arla Dairy on the industrial complex have made many, many thousands of pages and words to plead their case. If you can't read those and understand those in fully tomorrow, please defer this decision. Otherwise, as we recommend, refuse outright. So, thank you very much for listening today, and I'm sorry for the people whose names I haven't been able to read out because of my technical issues. But community power, I hope, will prevail, and good luck with your decisions. Please make the right ones, and let's move forward together as an organisation. Thank you very much for your time.